My name is Jim Furman, and I'm the CEO of the National Council on Aging, one of the founding members of Generations United, and I'm proud to continue to serve as a strategic advisor to this wonderful organization. I'd like to acknowledge Generation United current board chair, Matthew Melamed, who's the CEO of 0 to 3, and other board members here from Generations United Board, Barb Quaintance from AARP, and Paul Thornell from Citigroup, and also from the board of the Alliance for Families and Children is Tracy Wiring, the Executive Director of the American Public Human Services Association. It's a pleasure for me to be here because Generations United was founded by my predecessor, Jack Osofsky, the Executive Director of NCOA, and David Lederman, who was Executive Director of the Child Welfare League in 1986. And the organization was formed because these visionary leaders recognized that there were going to be forces in society trying to create wedges between the generation for political purposes, trying to pit one group against the other in the hope that it would fray the social fabric. And Generations United was created to speak the truth, to set the record straight, and to make sure that the media and others didn't buy into the hype and in fact had the facts about the bonds between the generations. So we are here today to release the Intergenerational Family Connection, the Relationships that Support a Strong America report. We are tweeting today, and I encourage you to join us using the hashtag #Families2014. This signature report is a result of a new partnership between Generations United and the Alliance for Children and Families, two great organizations with two great leaders, Donna Butts and Susan Dreyfus. This work contributes to Generations United's previous signature report, providing an intergenerational lens to important societal issues. We're honored to partner at GU, we're honored to partner with the Alliance to release this report and the new finding, which will be part of the Committing to Our Families, an extension of the Alliance's premier journal, Families and Society, which is celebrating its 95th anniversary in 2014. This report also coincides with the 20th anniversary of the United Nations International Year of the Family, which will be observed on May 15th. Together, Generations United and the Alliance want to set the record straight, want to make sure that we have the facts about the strengths of intergenerational bonds and families, and particularly important topic as more of us are growing older, more of us are grandparents, and at the same time, we have tremendous needs among the children in our society. The intention of this report is to spark a new discussion and innovative ideas about practices and policies that can bring the generations together. In this report, and in a few minutes, you will hear the results of a Harris Public Opinion Survey commissioned by Generations United and the Alliance for Children and Families. It explores some of the activities that the generation work together and the bonds that they have. It takes the pulse on this issue of intergenerational solidarity and social cohesion. And I think you'll see it refutes some of the myths that are still pervasive in the media. And it lays out broad principles to guide policymakers, businesses, and community leaders, advocates, and others as they develop policies and programs to help meet the needs of both generations. It is now my privilege to introduce Susan Dreyfus, the Alliance for Children and Families President and CEO, who will review the finding. Susan has the nickname of Queen Barrier Buster, which she still wears proudly because she has a reputation of being able to solve problems. She recently told the Milwaukee Business Journal, "I always say, give me a problem and I'll find a way under it, around it, over it, or through it." And I can say I've observed Susan in action, and she really does do that. She's been a leader in the Alliance for the past 2 years, and she has been leading that organization's effort to create a healthy society for children, adults, and families. Please welcome my friend and colleague, Susan Dreyfus.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Jim. What a great friend and colleague that you are. And thank you, Donna, and the Generations United team. We have a motto at the Alliance: collaborate widely and partner deeply. And it has been fabulous to partner with you. We have learned so much from you and your team, and it is the essence of what great partnerships are all about. And I hope we have also given our society a great gift with this report. So thank you so much. The Alliance, very simply, to strengthen the capacities and influence of America's nonprofit human-serving sector. And you notice I said human-serving, I didn't say human services, because we as a field and as a sector are more than providers of programs and services under contract with others. We are transformational agents of change with a great responsibility, not just to provide services, but to make sure that all children, adults, and families are living safe, healthy, and secure lives. We are delighted to be the editor and the publisher of the oldest social work journal in America today, and one of the preeminent journals in our world, Families and Society. And to now launch this first signature report is something we are very excited about, and again, with great thanks to GU for giving us this path, for thinking about how might families and society in the future help our country see and understand the timely, provocative, important issues of our time that are influencing America's families. I want to quote for you from the cover of today's report. I'm going to see if my 57-year-old eyes can do it here. This quote comes from the very first debut issue of Families and Society 95 years ago. From time to time, the state has made strenuous efforts to mold the family according to the needs, but ultimately, the state itself must always be molded by the family, since it is in the family that the citizen is made. There is no doubt that we can say that this great recession has caused and is causing a reset from kitchen tables to the halls of Congress. And one of the things that we are finding ourselves is moving from program thinking to social change thinking, and really realizing what is underneath, helping to solve some of the tough issues that we face. Our nation's vitality, strength, success is dependent on the strength of our human capital. And indeed, that is the work that we are ultimately about. It is through the work of our field and sector, whether it is working with persons living with mental illness, whether it's working with persons living with disability or developmental disability, whether it's working with families that are involved in the child welfare system or the juvenile justice system, you name it. One of the things that we know is whether it's our young or our elders, we know that beyond all of our clinical interventions, we know that beyond all of our case management services and formal programs, it is always the natural supports in a person's life that will be the final determining factor in that person's life's journey, especially during those times that we all have of adversity and difficulty. Yet often, our practice and our policies, whether that is at the organizational or at the public sector level, don't recognize this simple yet critical factor. Relationships, natural supports are the key. This past weekend, as my husband and I cared for our 2 grandsons, babysat while it was bowling night for our children, Skyped with our granddaughter in New York City so that we could see her first little ponytail, spoke with my mother, who is 87 years old down in Florida, spoke with one of my 6 siblings, and all 3 of my children. And then I woke up this morning to my daughter sending me a picture on email of her little girl waking up this morning. I thought about the findings in this signature report. Intergenerational bonds are very important to our sense of self, our development, our place in the world, our confidence, and our resilience. We found that 74% spend on average 12 hours a week providing for their extended family members in terms of social and emotional support. But we also found that 80% of our families laugh together. The good, healthy laughing that is so important to our health and to our happiness. And we found that no, we are not ruggedly independent, as oftentimes we'd like to think in our policy, as we think about fierce independence and people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and getting it done on their own. Not so. No one gets through life on their own. Generations support each other through time, resources, and what struck me was that 6 in 10 are helping each other with meeting basic needs. 61% of Americans with living parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, great-grandparents, or great-grandchildren reported giving extended family financial support for basic needs, housing, food, transportation, amounting to an average of $3,800 a year. 41% contribute toward medical expenses of their extended family on an annual average of $1,100 per year. We also found about technology. Oftentimes we all hear about technology and we're thinking everybody's sitting down there with their technology and we're becoming isolated from each other, and we found no, not so. Yes, while technology does have that potential for isolating us, we found that it is technology that is keeping families connected regularly and mitigates the realities of geographically dispersed families. My little Skyping with Alexandra on Sunday would be a great case in point. And yet, not surprisingly, families report stronger levels of connection as income rises, making it all the more important in our practice and in our policy that interfaces with lower income families that we have to support and strengthen family connections and support. I am a former child welfare director in 2 different states. And one of the things that I was struck by reading these reports, thinking, okay, what specifically does this mean? I thought about 2 things. When we do family visitation in child welfare, we stay focused on birth parents, very important, but we don't think about the extended family and the importance and the intentionality we need to have about those visits as well. And then I thought about family finding and engagement, something that is a radical practice moving across the country, and it's always about finding a final placement for a child. But yet we don't think about finding those relationships for a child. And this report tells us that is all the more important. It also appears from our data that we have much to learn from our Hispanic neighbors who report higher intergenerational cohesion and support. And we need to learn from them, and we need to understand what that is so that we can help see more of that going across our entire society. So at the Alliance, we will be doing our part. We will be doing our part to really get underneath this data, to really understand what are the policy areas we need to be advocating for and the changes, and then in partnership with all of you, let's get that job done together. Positive human development requires more than a strong bond between a parent and a child. Strong intergenerational bonds and resilient families are the key to the strength and vitality of our nation. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Jennifer Lutton, who is going to facilitate today's panel discussion. She's an award-winning journalist and national correspondent for National Public Radio, covering a range of family life and social issues. But what I like, too, is when she's not reporting, she, too, is part of a family with her husband, 2 boys, and their extended family. Please welcome Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you for being here, everyone. So this past weekend, we had Mother's Day, one of the holidays we have to celebrate family. And it always strikes me that people will wish me Happy Mother's Day, whether or not they know if I'm a mother. I mean, we all have mothers, but it just feels like, we obviously, as a nation, revere and celebrate families. And yet, as Susan just noted, when you have any sort of measure on a global scale, certainly we are way down at the bottom of that list of very family-unfriendly nations, lumped with some small countries that is on no one's list of the best vacation destinations. So a contradiction there in our national psyche. As someone who covers family issues, it's been striking these past 5-6 years how bound the generations are with the economic story that we've had since the recession. We have, home builders now building in-law suites into homes because so many people are living with their aging parents as the boomers enter. That will only increase as the boomers age. And, it's like a Walton's redux. And then on the other end, we have the boomerang generation, the millennials, moving in ever greater numbers back home because there aren't well-paying jobs available or they have crushing student debt. And so we see these bonds stronger than ever or more fraught. In any case, the generations relying on each other to a degree that is higher than in recent decades. This report talks to families about how they feel about all this, how they see their bonds and their strengths. Here to help us sort through all the various findings, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Each has a rich background on the issues that are touched in this report, the Intergenerational Family Connections. You have bios in your packets, so I'll just be brief here. First, Henry Pacheco. He serves as Medicine and Public Health Director for the National Hispanic Council on Aging. He's a primary care physician who is a public health expert focused on prevention and healthcare delivery, and with the Hispanic and Latino population in the country. Next, Lynette Fraga is the Executive Director of Child Care Aware. She's an early childhood expert who's focused her work on ensuring every child has access to high-quality child care and early learning experiences. Also, Amy Goyer, an aging and family expert for AARP and others. Amy's concentrated her energy on caregiving, multi-generational issues, and grandparenting. And she walks the walk. She's been the primary caregiver to her parents since 2009. And finally, we have Patrick Gussman. He's president and executive director of the Equal Footing Foundation. He's an attorney by training, a serial innovator, expert in technology, and is committed to ensuring underrepresented populations have equal access to technology careers. Let's welcome the panel. Okay. So first, hello everyone and welcome. Susan gave us a rundown of the findings here. This new poll asks Americans about the strength of their family connections, how they share time and money with each other, how technology impacts all this. One of the striking findings was how much more Hispanic families share time and money and report stronger connections. And I'd like to ask all of you how you see the importance of this, given that Latinos are the fastest growing demographic in the country. Maybe, what can we learn from them? Henry, do you want to start that?
Sure, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us. And of course, thank you to the Generations United Alliance for Children and Families to invite the National Hispanic Council on Aging to discuss this very interesting report. I say very interesting because, most of the time we live in the comfort of that tradition of families united, Hispanic families united, and the multiple benefits in every area, in area of health, in area of social interactions, in the area of economy, of how valuable that is in maintaining the integrity of the family. And we also know that there are significant pressures that essentially work against the structure of the family. Migrations, internal migrations due to jobs, housing. So therefore, we found the report very, very, very encouraging in the sense that it does show that traditional Hispanic cohesiveness is still there. What the origins are is hard to say. Hispanics are a mixture of many ethnicities, many races, many national origins. Just anecdotally, not too long ago, I was in Spain, and Spain, for example, has undergone a tremendous economic downfall, and yet, I didn't see the impact of it in the streets where I thought I would see it. A lot of unemployment, 20-something% unemployment. You didn't see that, and people thought, well, that's because most families take care of each other, and that's how they survive. And I think that's the case in Latin America, and in most cases, when we think of families, we don't think of just our nuclear, immediate mother, father, children, but it extends beyond grandparents and aunts, and so this is a tremendous study, and I think it just supports what we suspected, and we're very happy to hear that there is still evidence of that continuity of the Hispanic family.
Is it just because they have more people living with different generations? Because I saw that in the report as well. I mean, could that be part of this finding, or does it go beyond that?
Well, First of all, I'm not a sociologist or anthropologist, so whoever has there another opinion, please do so. But many times, why do families live together? I've seen many times I've seen that Hispanic families are seen living together because there's economic pressures that make them live together. That if they didn't have if they had the choice, they wouldn't. But I don't think that's the case. I think Hispanic families just live together because they do want to live together. In fact, I've seen many, and you see many, wealthy people that, in addition, they big land, they buy land, and they buy land for their grandparents to live there, for the others, for the sons, for the daughters nearby. So there is something embedded in the culture that goes beyond just living together because you have to, face economic circumstances. I think it's deeper than that.
My husband's cousin is married to a woman of Asian descent, and she's already offered her in-laws to move in with her. And
Exactly.
I thought, you are just a better daughter-in-law than I am.
Exactly.
But yet, so the poll also, Hispanics as a group, as a group, they're not at the top of the economic ladder in this
Absolutely
country.
not.
And yet the report finds there's stronger levels of connection as household income rises. Yet another form of inequality is such a buzzword these days that I hadn't even thought of this. Can someone explain why that would be and how that can change?
You're talking about as the household income rises, they are more likely to...
They report stronger family connections.
Right, stronger family connections, but perhaps also more resources to be able to share and support other family members, more of a sense of, I have the ability to do that, I have the stability, the financial security to do that. And I think that's a really important point and gives some implications around why we need to support families who are on a lower income, who may have the desire to have those connections but have so many challenges and not have the availability of the technology to stay in touch or the funds to help support each other. The time, maybe they're working 3 very low-paying jobs and don't have the time to provide, as this report indicated, a great deal of people are providing time. So I think it makes us realize that we need to continue to target especially resources for those who are low-income families.
I'd like to add a comment too. I also want to share my appreciation for being invited today to participate with you. I will say that after reviewing the report, particularly as it related to Hispanic families and the Latino culture, I think we have a lot more questions to ask. And I would say that one of the things that came to mind for me as I was looking and reviewing the report was that as there's some descriptors around what and how the Hispanic culture and how there's a great deal of connection in the families, that we do have to ask many more questions about what that implies for a changing demographic. That we do need to ask the question about why do families decide to continue to stay together? What can we learn about how, not necessarily what we might take from the Hispanic community and culture and apply it in others, but what can we learn about all cultures in terms of the demographic changes? And I think that there's a lot more questions that we can ask. To do more research.
To follow up on Lynette's comments, I think it provides an opportunity. So we look at the fact that according to the study that the Hispanic families have this cohesiveness as they're giving more resources, and that's the study as a whole, then we see that those resources that they're given are shared more. We should view this as an opportunity from a standpoint of looking at the growing demographics. We have cohesive units, so if we invested more money, more time, more energy into programs tailored around the Hispanic families, the return on investment, if we want to be very economics driven, the return on investment's there to do so. You could have a multi-generational positive effect by investing. And so I think the current political climate right now is all wrong. I mean, we have this situation where, immigration reform is about giving away things to people. No, it's about an investment in our future. People are here, And we see from this great study the fact that if we invest more in these families, then the return for all of us as Americans will be greater. So I think it yields a great opportunity, and we need to reverse the psychology around the statements that are being made around integration reform and other things into looking at the investments and where the investments will pay off in the future.
I want to ask about technology as well, because I have to say I was surprised at this. I'm a bit of a technophobe. I don't do Skype. I keep telling my husband my mom doesn't want us to look at her in her jammies, but he'll convince me when yeah, I guess so. But so overwhelmingly, families said technology is helping them stay connected. Only a very small share said it makes them more isolated. But I know I call my mom less now because I send her little quick emails at work. I send her photos of the kids, and she likes that. But the Sunday evening, half-hour phone call, it doesn't happen some weeks. And I do feel guilty, but I'm like, well, I emailed her 3 times. And I've interviewed grandparents who do lament that no one returns my calls anymore. And now we have this booming little cottage industry of teaching seniors how to use the computer and go on Facebook so they can stay in the family loop. So what do you all make of this survey? And I don't know, what can people like me learn from it?
So technology-wise, it's all of the above. So from the standpoint of the phone call versus the posting on Facebook, I mean, I would say it's something as simple as schedule the call still. Use your great Gmail or Outlook calendar to schedule the call and talk about those great posts that have been made in Facebook so it enriches the experience. I mean, so that's on that level. On the level of what's really happening out there, it is a struggle, and it's like any change management in people's lives. I think that the younger generation needs to be very patient and realize that this is a fundamental change, and that the older generations have to realize that this level of technology is only going to be accelerating. And so there are going to even be greater technologies that can allow you to do all the above. You have, yesterday I did a program on Google Glass. So in the future, you'll have the ability to have the Facebook post in front of your face. You're on the telephone talking, and you'll be able to change the pictures just by saying, go Google Glass and change the picture. So it's only accelerating. Might as well get comfortable with it.
I'll tell a story, actually. So when I'm a military child, and when I was very young, and my father was deployed to Vietnam, I was a baby at the time, and my mom wrote many, many letters and didn't hear maybe for a very long time any responses. And then after September 11, I had the good fortune of working with many military families with very young children, and much of the conversation was around attachment and relationships, and how do we help to support those relationships, both when families came, when service members came back or while they were away. And by the way, those separations don't always happen, obviously, in the military community during deployments. They can happen in many, many different kinds of situations, in many families. And technology was at a space where Skype was being used, and immediate email exchange, the ability, everybody has a smartphone, and so forth and so on. And there were opportunities where service members were reading to their young, reading stories aloud, and being videotaped and streamed to their young child. And so I really saw some, from a positive, optimistic perspective, ways in which technology can be leveraged so that children can actually feel connected to their parent. So there are positive ways. I think we do need to understand, however, and ask the questions about where's the balance. So when is Google Glass just a little much, or we're not quite ready for it? And when may there be real opportunities where we can optimize through really difficult transitions or times, and children may actually benefit from that technology. And I agree, it's not going away.
So, and we find at AARP that, and our members consistently, they are adopting technology in large numbers. 85% of those over the age of 50 use social media. So that's It might be Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all the forms of social media. That might be surprising to people, but it's not surprising to me because I'm coming across so many people, and grandparents, all of our grandparenting research continues to confirm that grandparents are increasingly adopting these ways because they may know it's the only way they can get their teenage grandchild to connect with them if they text them. And so they're learning these things. AARP is a new initiative called AARP Tech, Technology, Education, and Knowledge, to get out there and have online training and videos and in-person training to help people adopt this and one of the main motivations is communicating with family. When you ask older people, why did you join Facebook? It's so commonly because my daughter or my granddaughter signed me up, or a family member. That's the motivation, is connecting with family.
But it's not always possible. I mean, we've got my mother-in-law the iPad, and then we tried the MacBook Air, but if you've got mobility issues and can't move the fingers like you used to, it can be technically very difficult.
And they're developing, there are lots of companies out there who are developing adaptive things and trying to make these things more user-friendly. But I think that the technology world needs to wake up to the fact that needs to be a priority, especially as boomers are aging and greater numbers are going to be using this technology.
Just one thing to quickly interject there. There also has to be the human touch around the technology. So you talked about this booming industry of teaching and stuff, but it needs to be some of the grandkids or the parents who sit down and take maybe the 2 hours to work through what Facebook is. My mother-in-law is now finally on Facebook, and it was done because my sister-in-law spent 2-3 hours mind-numbing, going through every step of the way, and now she's on there, and she sees the pictures and she comments, why is that one's dress too short, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I had another story. I met a grandmother recently who, it was her birthday, and her daughter came over to celebrate with her, and she said she had a surprise for her, and she took her in the other room, and there she had her computer set up, and her granddaughter in Iraq was wishing her a happy birthday. And she said she just couldn't believe it. That would just be unheard of. Not that many years ago, to be that far away and still communicating and having that personal touch.
Henry?
Well, the technology has been perhaps one of the blessings for Latinos who have immigrated to the United States in large numbers. I remember when my father traveled, for example, came here for many years ago, and I was a child. We wrote letters, and so at most during a year you would have perhaps 6, 7, 8 exchanges because of the length of time that it took. But nowadays, the next big step was the telephone. And if you go around Hispanic neighborhoods and go to the stores, even the 7-Elevens, you see an incredible array of phone cards. And that has been a lifeline for people with their families. And when you go to Latin America, you see internet cafes practically in every block where people can walk into a cabin and just talk on the phone. Now, being able to talk on the phone is, the cost has gone down so much. And then being able to talk on the phone via internet has dropped the price to the point where, when I'm Bolivian, and sometimes when I go to Bolivia and I'm waiting there for some cabin to be emptied, and because there are many, you pick up the phone and it's hot. It's hot because somebody has been communicating for hours. So technology has been incredibly life-saving. Life-saving meaning saving the quality of life of families. Incredible for communication, for bridging those bonds that normally would have been a great barrier. So it's the closest thing to what Latinos want. Latinos are folks who like to touch people, who like to hug people, and technology brings them the closest. It's also, it's been a blessing indeed that the cost of communication has dropped significantly. So before it was, a bit difficult, and you have to have a computer, you have to have this, you have to have that. Even calling cards were expensive, but the cost has dropped tremendously. So it's a tremendous advance, and I think has contributed greatly to keep families together, to keep families well informed about what's going on either side of continents or countries.
You know, technology is also an area where there's such great possibilities for intergenerational exchange in terms of learning. There are ARP has a program called Mentor Up, where you're building on that strength of the younger generation who are so digitally savvy to help teach older people who want to learn more about that. And there are many models across the country like that. And it's such a great way to build on the strengths of the different generations.
Okay, back in 1948, I did not realize the United Nations actually declared the family to be a fundamental unit of society that was entitled to protection by society and state. And yet, in this time of limited resources and a still struggling economy, families can feel kind of besieged all around. You've got childcare that can cost more than a mortgage or more than college. Young people don't think Social Security is going to be there for them. Generations, as was mentioned, can feel kind of pitted against each other when these zero-sum budget battles. How would you all like to see society and the state protect families in this current economic environment? Patrick.
I want to harken back to some comments I made about investments. So we talk about investment in a plant, investment in a number of things, but we have to talk about investments in human capital. So when we talk about investments in human capital, it then gets away from some of these pitting the generations against each other. But also, I think, since you're going back to 1948, we have to think about the Great Generation. So everyone talks about them, placed on the pedestal, and then now there's the talk about the later generations of, being lazier, not wanting to do the same things and take more from the government. But when you look at it, that Great Generation benefited from things such as the GI Bill and a whole host of other things. They benefited from all the infrastructure investment in the schools and such, which meant that they could have high quality schools for their children without having to spend their own personal money. So I think these two things, giving our great generation a history lesson so that they aren't as ready to say, well, I don't want to pay for welfare, I don't want to pay for the schools. I mean, I heard one of the most distressing things I heard was there was a woman interviewed and she said she wanted to cut out school lunch because she didn't, or in school breakfast, because she just didn't really see how that was a benefit to her. And I think that from the standpoint of these reports and how can we strengthen the family is we need to make sure that people see this human face of these decisions and also give them, in my view, serious history lessons about all the things that they received in society so that we can make more rational decisions about how we invest our funds and how we set our tax policies.
So you actually hit on two things that I just want to mention. One is you mentioned the cost of childcare. I was struck by one of the statistics in the report that you put out was that 25% of family members contribute money for child care or caregiving, and 4 in 10 give time for care or caregiving. And Child Care Aware of America actually recently did a report on the cost of child care. And in 31 states and the District of Columbia, in fact, infant care is higher than the cost of college tuition at a 4-year public college. So it is incredibly challenging as we think about the supports needed for families and how can we, with a quarter and 25% of family members contributing, this is not only a challenge for the parent of a child, but obviously a challenge for the whole family, because this is an expense that all of them are taking on as a potential burden in cost. And so that's one point we need to really think further about from a policy perspective. How do we change the frame so that we can be supportive? And the second point was in regards to multi-generational support. In the early childhood field, right now there's this re-emergence of the idea of two-generation support or approaches or multi-generation supports for families. Now, this isn't a new idea. Head Start, for example, has been doing comprehensive family when they're looking at early childhood with children as well as with supportive parents simultaneously in this two-generational, multi-generational approach. But there's been a real re-emergence of this in the early childhood landscape over the last year and a half. And I do wonder about whether or not this reemergence is as a result of this changing demographic, the idea of comprehensive supports for families, and us learning a bit more about the importance of multi-generation and intergenerational engagement. I think it is, again, going back to this is a real opportunity for us as a country to learn more about what exactly that looks like, because evidence-based outcomes is so critical. But this is another arena, I think, where this report puts a highlight on where we could really take advantage of that as an opportunity.
You know, you mentioned the kitchen table conversation. I think we need to have millions of kitchen table conversations about all of these issues and raise that to a national level, and in a way that takes into account the cultural nuances and differences, the needs of the various generations. We talk about caregiving. I'll take the other end of the spectrum, and as a caregiver myself, with very intense caregiving for the last 5 years, this is an issue very near and dear to my heart. But we have 42 million caregivers in this country at a value of about $450 billion a year, that if they were paying for that service. But we need to be better at connecting those caregivers, empowering those caregivers so that families can work together better as teams, and recognizing the incredible contributions that families are making, and that it's a very concrete and tangible, both in terms of time and money, those contributions are being made, and that needs to be part of this national conversation.
Well, I think any program that supports the family is very important. Things like Social Security, Medicare. When you have families living together, various generations, for example, you see that it's very common for grandparents to take care of children. The fact that the grandparents can take care of children make it possible for either both or one of the members of the family to be out working. And likewise, keeping those older folks healthy once again contributes to that, to keeping that family cohesive. Because imagine in a household where the older adults or one of the grandparents takes care of the children, that allows them to work, that allows them to bring in money and well-being to the family. If they get sick and they didn't have the support of Medicare, for example, that would be catastrophic for the family and disruptive. Likewise, Social Security, most folks, if they depended on Social Security alone, would be deeply embedded in poverty. An average check of $600-700 just cannot buy rent and utilities. So, whereas a Social Security check of $600-700 to an older family, to an older member of the family that lives within the family nucleus, is beneficial, and it's life-saving, and at the same time, it's very important because many times not only are older adults caring for children, but also eventually the children are caring for older adults. So programs, once again, that seek to promote family togetherness, family cohesion, that support the stability of the family, I think go a long way in supporting the nation as a whole, because as we've seen, it's very hard to survive as an individual and very hard to thrive. And most of us don't just want to survive and thrive, but we want to, go beyond what is our potential and the potential of our children. And so it is very important to look at these programs, and not just for what they do for the individual, but what they do for the family. And I believe the strength of the family is what contributes to the strength of the nation as a whole.
So you mentioned grandparents watching grandkids, but in this era of no retirement for many people working longer than ever, that can mean a trade-off for the grandparents as well. I interviewed someone a few weeks ago whose mother-in-law was taking half days off her second job to watch her grandchildren, and was able to stop doing that because San Francisco, along with Vermont, recently passed a law that said people have the right to ask for a flexible work schedule. And this woman got it, which
That's
then
right.
allowed her mother-in-law to keep all of her second job. So this brings me to the workplace. And finally, I just want to ask everyone, what can the workplace do? And we know this is also driven by public policy. We have this rash of, small surge in states and localities passing various forms of paid leave. The same bills keep coming up and failing in Congress. What do you see happening, and what would you like to see on the workplace front?
So, two different things. The first is in the workplace itself, since I represent the Equal Footing Foundation, and what's really important to us is mentoring, is that there should be more incentives for mentoring within the workplace. The second item is that to be very provocative, the real levers of what's happening in the political space now are the older generation, and sometimes people need to be called out. And their politics are driving very selfish choices. So I know time's running out, so I'm going to stop there, but if I were a policymaker, I'd be going at Jim and figuring out how we could do that a little bit better.
I would say that one element that we really need to be thinking about in the workplace is providing information for families. I think there is a lot of information that's lacking around supports for family members and also empowerment of employees to employers around what they're entitled to and what they can be doing, while at the same time advocating for additional workforce supports.
As I mentioned, the 42 million caregivers in this nation, 3/4 of those work at some point during their caregiving journey. So this is a huge issue. And I think in the workplace, we need to have both programs and policies that are supportive to flexibility and caregivers being able to do that and do their jobs that they are very committed to. But also we need to educate caregivers about existing policies and programs that they may not be aware of or feel that they can use. And so we need to do that, and I think we need to also look at a multi-generational workforce and the strengths of these different generations that are in the same organization and learning from each other and not looking at it as, it's us against them and we're competing. We all have strengths that we can work together and learn from each other in the workplace.
I think that an employment that focuses only on the individual employee will eventually not succeed as much as one that looks at the whole family, because employees value an employment where they see there's flexibility, there's understanding, and there is also a willingness to know what is the family situation of the employee. An employer that, for example, knows if you have older parents at home or small children. An employer that may eventually create programs such as babysitting in their own firms or in their own locations. An employer that simply shows flexibility at the slightest comment, where somebody says, I have a sick grandparent, for example, at home, or a sick father at home, a sick mother at home, that will, not think twice about saying, take the laptop and work from home, and showing that flexibility. So I think that's they will reap the rewards of that kind of focusing on the family as a whole, because once again, I think an employee will feel that this is a corporation for which he or she wishes to belong and stay here, because they know that they're looking after not just them as production units, but as the whole family. And I think I've seen the firms that focus on family, that have annual family picnics, and those that are very family friendly succeed and do well.
And with that, I think our time is up. Henry Pacheco, Amy Goyer, Lynette Fragas, and Patrick Gussman. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
And now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Dorothy Thomas. She is one of her family. Her family is one of the families profiled in this report. Dorothy has graciously agreed to share a little about her family's story and its strength. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dorothy Thomas.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that introduction. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here and to have been chosen to be a family that's profiled. Families are indeed important, whether it's not traditional or non-traditional. Families are very, very important. And my husband and I learned at a very early age the importance of interdependence. He was from a family of 9, and right away you know that there was interdependence there. And whenever there were challenges, they just rose to the occasion. They were able to bounce back. I was from a family of 3, and I learned very early age the importance of interdependence. At the age of 24, my dad died of pancreatic cancer, and we were just devastated by that. My mother required a lot of comforting, and my sister and I comforted her on a regular basis. We'd go to the hospital, and my dad had this terrific sense of humor, and we laughed a lot. In addition to being a barber, he drove a pharmaceutical truck. And my husband stepped right in. He said, "Don't worry, Dad, I will drive this truck for you." So he continued to drive the truck until my dad died. Years later, my mother went to a class reunion, and she met her childhood sweetheart, and she married him, and they were together for 25 years. They lived in New York. And later on, in their 80s, I realized that they needed to be near us. I live in Newport News, Virginia. So we found this very nice retirement community, and we moved them to Newport News, Virginia with us. And I visited them every day. And as my mother's health declined, we had to separate them. She had to go to a nursing home, and he was at a retirement community. But I still visited each of them daily, and it was such a blessing for them. On holidays, we'd invite them to our home, and on birthdays. So they always knew that we cared a great deal for them. Later on, I have a daughter who's living with me. She's gone through trials and tribulations. She's going through a divorce, and she has sarcoidosis. But recently, I was attempting to get a bicycle for my granddaughter out of the garage, and in front of that garage was this 100-pound nitrogen tank that fell on this foot. And that's why I'm wearing this foot today. This is why I'm wearing the boot and crutches. When I went to the doctor, he said, "Mrs. Thomas, it's going to be about 10 to 12 weeks before you will be able to walk again." I was thinking, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You can't be serious about this. I do tennis twice a week. I do Zumba. You're going to have to do something about that. So he says, "I tell you what, you will be able to walk in 5 weeks if you have surgery." Then he started talking about these screws that he was going to put in my foot, but I didn't care about the screws. I said, "Okay, let's go with the surgery." So I was just blessed that my daughter is with me, because she waited on me hand and foot. She's, in addition to going through a divorce, she has 2 small children, and one, Matthew, has, what is that he has? Autism. But she waited on me hand and foot. She drove me to all of my appointments. She took me shopping. She did everything for me. So I was just blessed to have her in my life. And Maya, who is 7 years old, is just very, very grown. And she would always ask, "Nana, how you doing? How's your foot doing?" My husband recently had a pacemaker done, and she would go in and say, "Papa, are you doing all right today?" So she's just very, very concerned about the 2 of us. And so we're just blessed about that. My husband has a passion of buying and restoring cars. And just recently, he just wanted to show the love that he had for our 3 grandchildren. He gave them the car because he gave each of them a car because he knew that they would act responsibly. And I have 3 grandchildren in Atlanta, Georgia, and so we're able to keep in contact with them through email and Facebook. So it's just a joy to have a family and to know that Too much is given, much is required, and we try to instill this in our family members, and we hope that this will be passed down from generations to generation, the importance of interdependence and the importance of resilience. And we have this resilience because of our faith. I thank you for your attention.
Mrs. Thomas, thank you for that wonderful story and reminding us that statistics are really about people and families. And so, and reminding us that all, as this report shows, myths and media hype aside, families are strong, resilient, and incredibly interdependent upon each other. It's now my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Donna Butts, the Executive Director of Generations United. I had the privilege of interviewing her for the job 17 years ago, you know, when I think of Donna, we obviously made the right choice, but the two of my favorite quotes come to mind that I think personify Donna. One is Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, which is, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And Donna had been a dreamer about intergenerational solidarity and a great force in bringing us together. And the second quote is by Theodore Roosevelt: "The best way to get the job done is to pick the right," he said, "right man. I'll say the right woman and get the hell out of the way to let her do her job." So with that, please welcome, join me in welcoming Donna Butts.
I'm glad you still think it was the right decision, Jim, after all these years together. Susan, I'm not even going to try to do it without glasses, so bear with me. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us today. Thank you for the wonderful, wonderful opportunity to work with Susan and the Alliance team. It's been fabulous. A great panel, wonderful moderator, terrific story. Thank you all. It's been an honor the last few years to work with the United Nations as they've been getting ready for this international observation. What I really appreciated, and the reason I've been involved, is because they recognized there were 3 areas that they wanted countries to think about. And one of those areas was intergenerational solidarity and social cohesion. And I was like, yes, you get it. And it was wonderful to have a chance to work with them, to hear a little bit about what's going on around the world. For example, Doha has hosted 2 different conferences on intergenerational dialogue and the importance of intergenerational solidarity in families. In Wales, they're working every day to make Wales the first country for all generations, not a neighborhood, not a community, not a city, but a country for all generations. In Singapore, they sponsored intergenerational bonding contests so that families could bond over whether it was cooking or athletics or other things. They did these contests to really connect the country. So what do we get in America? I haven't heard any call for intergenerational dialogue. I haven't heard any call for a minister that many countries have on family connection, family intergenerational solidarity, anything that merges the fact that we don't live in individual pods. We're not old alone, we're not young alone, we're not in the middle of our lives alone, we're in families. And so to recognize that and to acknowledge it, what we really believe, and I know Susan and I have talked about this as we were getting ready for this report, is that a lot of people get stuck, and especially in this country, on this idea whenever it gets hard, they talk about intergenerational warfare, intergenerational conflict, either or, zero sum, we have to make a choice. We can't possibly support our most important generations. And we really believe that we have to leap over that dead-end debate, because people get stuck there. As soon as you start talking about it, they get stuck there. So what we're trying to do today and in our work every day is make sure that we leap over that dead-end debate. And we're so grateful that we're now working with Susan, the great folks who we got to work with as we were creating this report and this project today, so that we could come up with an observance in our country that was a positive, that celebrates families, that talks about the strength, about the connections, about the importance of that in our world. And what we chose to do is to mirror some of the recommendations that the UN has made. And what they realize, because they have such diversity, we think we do, they have such diversity. So what they do is they set about setting broad principles for countries to consider so that they can take those and look at those. And that's what we tried to do with this report, was take some of those broad principles that people could work with and could see how it relates, not just in Washington, D.C., but in Salem, Oregon, or in Austin, Texas, or in wherever they are. And so what we did was we wanted to call on leaders of business, government, nonprofits, and other sectors. And we set about 4 principles that we were recommending, and I just want to go over those briefly with you. First was to create policies and practices that ensure equitable access to resources. So what can that look like on the ground? One of the reports we did a couple years ago had to do with food and nutrition programs, and we've really age segregated those programs. What we need to do is ensure that nutritious food is available across generations through SNAP, through child nutrition programs that could be co-located or combined and benefit multiple generations. We need to think about expanding the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, so that it's available to people beyond the age of 65, because we know that a number of older people are raising grandchildren and would be eligible for that. We need to think, as was mentioned earlier, in 2-generation strategies, but what we'd advocate for is 3 generations or even 4-generation strategies. Acknowledge the fact that we have people living longer, able to contribute, and able to support each other. Next, we said to consider the protective factors in many Hispanic families that build those family connections that people have been talking about today. And one that we have advocated before is the option to adopt homes or adapt homes or properties so they can accommodate multiple generations. Jennifer mentioned in-law suites, but we also know that ECHO, which is a part of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, hasn't been funded. And what that would allow is for people to build additional rooms onto their homes. So it's not just something that wealthy people could do, but lower income people could as well. We also need to ensure, and I think Patrick talked a lot about this, that immigration reform proposals preserve families and that they allow them to be fully engaged in community life and access the services that they need. Third, we need to enact policies and practices that support and ultimately grow the financial and time exchanges that are happening with families. We've heard a lot of personal stories today, and I know for me, I have an older sister who's 100% disabled. And we're fortunate because my husband and I were able to buy a little house for her that she would never have been able to live in on her limited disability. And she takes pretty much full-time care of 5 of her grandchildren so that her children can then go to school and work and take care of them. So it's that whole extended circle of that. There's the informal transfers that are occurring. So how do we encourage and support those? One is family leave. We talk a lot about family leave, and it was mentioned that we're one of the only developed countries that doesn't provide financial support for people when they take maternity and paternity leave by law. And oftentimes when you even look at family leave policies, they only talk about a mother, a father, a traditional family, and children, whereas many grandparents are in the workforce and are the primary caregivers of their children. So we need to think about family leave in a broader sense. We also need to consider increasing the National Family Caregiver Support Act. That was passed over 11 years ago, and it was the first time in the Older Americans Act that they really acknowledged children, because 10% of those funds can be used to support grandparents raising grandchildren. So realizing that caregiving is across the lifespan and not just at certain points. And then we also believe that we need to reduce the barriers to shared sites and to shared care. Take, for example, adult care, daycare, child care. It's great when they're co-located, when you have intergenerational care. We know that it saves dollars while making sense. But yet when you look at the regulations and the rules that govern each of those, a child needs so many meals, an older adult needs so many meals, they need so many square feet, they need so many caregivers. People give up because it's just too complex. Yet it makes sense. It makes it easier for people to drop the parent they may be caring for and the child that they care for at the same place, and for those two to intermingle during the day. It makes a lot of sense, so we need to look at how we can make it easier. And last, we need to improve access to use new technology to strengthen connections between families. And that the panel talked about that a lot, about the benefits and sometimes also the fear. And I know for me, I'm on Facebook, but I like to see what people are doing, but I hardly ever post anything. The one time I do post is when I moved my goddaughter out of college and moved her into college, in and out of college. And that got so many likes and so many shares, it was really reaffirming. I should do that more often. Although somebody said that you may end up moving more people if you think it was such a great experience. But technology can be really, really helpful. And one thing we need to do is that we're ensuring that broadband technology is accessible to all communities and all ages. We also need to look at how assistive technology can allow older adults to age in place. We know that older adults want to age in place. We know it's less expensive for them to age in place, and technology can help that. And especially when that technology is connected to a younger person that's helping them to understand it, helping them to use it, helping them to see the benefits. And I would take that even a little bit further to a suggestion that we had in our last signature report, which is as a country, we think about our issues in silos and age silos. And when you think about people who want to age in place, and you think about the fact that we have this huge student debt crisis, why can't we think about it more creatively and think about something like Teach for America, where young people can work off part of their student debt by helping older adults stay in their own homes, either by home sharing or by taking care of the older adults who are on their cul-de-sac or their street. There are ways that we need to think past how we've gotten ourselves stuck in these particular silos or barriers. I always say we have to smash the silos. Now, one of the other elements that the United Nations did, they're going to be celebrating the International Year of the Family, the 20th anniversary, this Thursday in New York, and I have the privilege of sharing a little bit about our report, but I also have the privilege of sharing a little bit of information about this book, which is going to be released on May 15th, and it's called Family Futures, and it has contributions from all over the world about the value of families. It's available for free online, and it'll be available at the UN bookstore starting May 15th. There's a sample copy out front if you want to have a peek at it. But it's a lovely celebration of families and something that we can share. So I want to end by just thanking the Generations United staff, the little engine that could, who always seem to manage to pull things. I always say we've managed to pull rabbits out of hats, but that's only because I have 125 hats, so we manage. But also the Alliance staff, who've been absolutely wonderful, flexible, and sharing of their wisdom and their experiences as we've developed and forged this new strong partnership. But I would be remiss if I also didn't acknowledge the glue of that partnership, and I'd like to thank Tanya Wiley, who coordinated this project and managed that terrain between our groups and kept a smile on the whole time. It was absolutely fabulous. So Tanya, thank you. One of the quotes that we've been using this week as we've been thinking about Family Week was by somebody named Gail Lemmet Buckley, and I thought it was really lovely. Family faces are magic mirrors. Looking at people who belong to us, we see the past, the present, and the future. I really believe, and we all believe in this room, I think, that our country benefits from strong families. We should honor and celebrate them, but not just today, and not just May 15th, but every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna, Susan, Jennifer, and the distinguished panelists. Intergenerational family connections, relationships that support a strong America. Our goal today was with this report and our ongoing efforts, is to celebrate the strength of our country's families and to spark a conversation how we can do more both to strengthen families and the bond more broadly between older people, younger people, and the folks in the middle. As Donna said, this is not a zero-sum game. We should not fall into the trap of thinking that we have to choose, but in fact, the solution to many of the challenges facing older people and many of the challenges facing youth in this country can be addressed by bringing those two resources together. We know, for example, that one of the most important things for children before they get to school is that somebody reads to them on a regular basis. Who better than grandma or grandpa has the time to read? We know that when people are struggling to stay at home, the visit of a younger person can often make that difference. So this report reinforces the fact that, and these organizations, that we have an opportunity to look for the solutions in strengthening our families and strengthening the bond between the generations. This event has been taped and will be available online soon. The report and the infographics are available both the Generations United website and the Alliance for Children and Family. Please share the widely and help us with the conversation. On behalf of both organizations, we challenge you to help us find the way to support families through programs, through policies, through innovation, because we know the truth here, that our country has flourished because we are interdependent, and it will continue to flourish as long as we remember that we are stronger together. Thank you all for coming today, and have a good day.